Well, good day. My name is Robert Magee. I work at SideFX Software, and I'm here today to talk to you about SideFX Labs and the concept of building tools in Houdini. Specifically, the idea of artists building their own tools. One of the things that's great about Houdini because of its node-based workflow is you have this ability to create tools that support your team and allow you to do higher level things that maybe aren't in Houdini out of the box. The reason this is possible is because when working in Houdini, everything you do gets stored in nodes. So nodes get your creative decisions. They get wired together into networks, which create a non-destructive flow of information. And you can have flexible interconnections and things to make that work. Now, once you've got that, what you've got is essentially a recipe for whatever it was that you did, but with the ability to go in and make changes to certain parameters to create a unique result. So if you could have different people working on that same network, they could all get unique results. So one of the things we created along the way is the ability to collapse all that and turn it into an asset and then promote parameters. And what that allows is you to basically create your own tool. And it can be a high-level tool that then gets handed to other artists, and they're able to achieve more because they don't have to put down all the nodes and set all the parameters. They're sort of getting a lot of that for free. So the general procedure for that is you start with your node network, and then you collapse it into a single node. So inside this node, it's a subnetwork, and inside that will be all the original nodes. So you haven't lost them, they're just hidden from view. What you then do is you build a high-level interface. Now this isn't writing code. All you do is we have a widget that comes up and you drag and drop parameters from the nodes down below, promote them up, and when you're up there you can give them unique names so that their artists understand them easily and so on. And then this gets stored on disk, and then that can be loaded into another Houdini scene, and it functions exactly like any other tool in Houdini. As a matter of fact, our R&D team often wraps their tools up as digital assets. So many of the tools you use in Houdini today are actually digital assets that were wrapped up. They create a bunch of low-level nodes that they're assuming you're never going to touch, and then they get wrapped up into something that's more palatable. That, like we have, for instance, tools and SOPs that do dynamics. They've literally got whole dynamic networks buried inside them so that they can do this. One of the exciting things about these assets or tools as well is that you can take them and say, well, what if I want to put them in another application? Now that would seem ridiculous. These other applications don't read Houdini, so how are they going to do that? Well, what we did was we created something called the Houdini Engine plugin. And Houdini Engine plugin allows you to take a digital asset, load it into a host application, and then what happens is under the hood, the libraries are acquired and cooked, and the nodes are all set up, and the results kick back to the host application. Then all the parameters are there as well. So you actually get a little interface in the host application. You can move the parameters, and as you do so, the engine recooks everything, and you get the result back in the host application. This is something that many of our customers have been able to utilize, probably a little bit more in the game side of things, but I imagine in other areas as well. And we support Maya, 3D Studio Max, Unity, and Unreal with that as well. And the API for creating the Houdini engine is available on GitHub. So if you have some other application you want to plug into, you're free to do so. So there's interesting possibilities above and beyond. So here's an example of some assets that were created for a game using a Houdini digital asset. And here is that tool in action. So it's inside the Unreal. So this is an example of one using Engine and using some geometry. It can push and pull and build up some walls. So this is an example of a higher level tool where a level designer or a set designer cannot have to worry about all the polygons and UVs and all the things that are under the hood. They just move things around and they get what they want. And that's pretty cool. And so they've, in this particular game, they created some pretty sophisticated stuff, and much of it is procedural built into these kinds of assets. Now here's an example from Ian Smith, who you're going to meet in the next presentation. And these examples show just the kinds of things that digital assets can do. It can go in and allow you to modify this wall, or you can do something like a spider web. And that's a perfect example where if you asked a modeling team, can you model me 10,000 spider webs, they'd tell you to go jump somewhere. But the fact that you have a digital asset where now you can do very sophisticated, spider webs all over the place is fantastic. And what's neat about it is when you use a digital asset in all these different places, is if the person who authored it said, well, I'm going to add some extra features, and I think we could do this, and oh, I can add a spider that crawls around, and we can have a checkbox for that. When those changes get made, they can be propagated to all the artists using that asset in all the different places, and then they get the benefit of those new tools. So it's a very interesting process in terms of interacting back and forth. And this, of course, leads to, I think, one of the most important reasons for doing this is iterations. With these kinds of higher level tools, you're going to be able to explore options faster than ever before. And this is really always important in projects, to be able to react to the needs of your director, of whoever is making the creative decisions. And if you have the flexibility to go in and say, well, let me just change a few things or check off a few things and get a new result, then that's going to be pretty positive. And here's an example from a Project Titan that we have that we did. It's also focused on Unreal, but again, these are digital assets working in this sort of way. And in this case, scaffolding. I mean, again, modeling scaffolding to meet exactly the configuration you need would be a lot of work, but by doing it through an asset, it's just put a couple boxes down and the tool sort of does the work for you, and you get a pretty sophisticated result easily. And so on. So this also leads to another area in film where this has interesting possibilities, which is virtual production. Because here you have an example, in virtual production, you've got the volume, and the volume's being fed by Unreal. And there's no reason why you couldn't have procedural assets in the volume. And often what happens in these virtual productions is they'll do early walkthroughs of a set with the director. And if the director can look and say, well, I wish that building was a little taller, and somebody just moves a dial, and I wish there's some scaffolding over there, so you whip that up. There's interesting possibilities of this. And one of the things I always like about digital assets is you can also optimize the result. So if you know you're going to the wall and it has to have a certain, optimization in order to run properly in the wall, that can be built into the asset. We often have our game customers do that. They do something really sophisticated, but then they have like a few nodes at the end that poly reduce it and do the UVs and get everything ready so that it is game ready. And I think that would be the same for working with the volume. So I think that what's the advantage of these artist-built tools? Well, clearly it allows you to rapidly create things. You can art direct. I mean, obviously art direction of things is critical in everything that you do, and assets make that easier and quicker. And again, like I said, the optimized results. And the key benefits are things like, well, iterations, and more iterations. I know that can be a bad thing eventually, but it never hurts to have that possibility. And repetitive tasks can be handled easily. Instead of putting 10 nodes down 50 times a day, you're putting one node down 50 times a day. And that sort of covers the ground. So that's really important. The other thing is projects are getting larger and larger and with lots more detail. So if you can have higher level tools that give you that detail without you having to manage it every step of the way, that's really, really powerful. And last minute changes become more feasible in this kind of model. Again, it was for a video game, but one artist was telling us how he's working on a roller coaster in a project, and he was presenting it to the team, and they were like, we almost love it, but we wish it was just a little bit more dramatic, a little taller. He said, okay, just a second, went back to his desk, spit it up. And because he'd built it as a digital asset, he was able to make those changes rapidly, and they were able to approve it right then and there. So that's the sort of power of this kind of thing, in the communication and the sort of the creative side of things. Now, I haven't mentioned SideFX Labs yet, so let's jump into what is SideFX Labs. Well, SideFX Labs is a suite of tools. I think this says 230, but I think we're up to over 300 now, of tools that are designed to streamline workflows for artists. So we have a team of people that are essentially TDs that talk to clients, find out what are some of the pain points that they're dealing with, and we try to find solutions that we can make available through this Labs. Labs is a little outside of R&D, so their dev cycle doesn't have to align with version 19 or 20 or whatever. They can actually just release tools whenever. Sometimes these tools, if they've achieved their goal, actually get wrapped up into Houdini and become an official tool down the line. But this is a great sort of stepping stone towards that. We see them as experimental, but many of them are solid enough that they definitely can be used in production, and that's very important as well. So we do have a page under product. On the product menu on the website, there's a SideFX Labs page, and that can lead you to the documentation, the GitHub page if you want to go see that side of things, and so on. And it also, there's links there to 2 places with lots of information. One is the ArtStation page, which sort of lists some of the key tools that we made available and a little bit about how to use them. And there's also a product roadmap available, so you can see what we're working on, what's been recently released, and so on and so forth. So that's pretty exciting as well. So those all come off the main Labs page on the website. So how do you get SideFX Labs? Well, in fact, you can install it when you install Houdini. So when you go to install Houdini, whether you're in the launcher or the old installer, there's a checkbox and you say, yes, I want Labs, and it'll just get installed every time. There's also a SideFX Labs shelf, which is not available automatically, but you can pull it up. And its first button is Update Toolset. So if you click on that, you'll get the latest, greatest of the Labs tools. And if you forgot to install them in the first place, it'll go and get them and put them in place. So there's a bunch of different ways of getting access to them. Once you have them installed, some of them will go on the shelf that we have here. And others are just available in the different contexts of Houdini. And so you find them, one way to find them is go Tab, Labs, and then all of them will get listed for that context. So this is the geometry context. There might be other ones in DOPS, there might be other ones in the object level, then so on and so forth. So anyways, just Tab, Labs, and you can sort of see what's available there. And like I said, we have the documentation you can go to learn more about them as well. So when it comes to us, you know, the important thing to think of is that SideFX Labs is sort of an extension of your in-house R&D team. You already have people in-house making tools. Well, we're trying to sort of get ahead of the game and build some of these tools for you. And one of the things that's exciting is that Labs tools, because they're digital assets, some people don't use the tools. They download them, rip them apart, figure out what the heck we did, and then build a custom version for their own studio. So they don't have to be the end product. Labs can be a learning tool as much as they are an actual production tool. Now some of the areas, let's go over some of the areas where these lab tools sort of focus their attention. Integrations is one key area that we have a lot of tools on, and they've built integrations with a bunch of different things like Quad Remesher, Resom for UVs, Quixel, and so on and so forth. So that was sort of maybe some of the instigation initially, was we wanted better interconnections with certain applications, and the Labs team was the one that took that on and made sure that things were working. And so let's look at an example of a couple of those. So Mapbox, we've had several different iterations of Mapbox. The latest one just came out recently, version 3. And this new one has more accurate scale-based, so it's just a little bit more accurate in how it brings the data in, and the tiling is a lot better in terms of as you bring different tiles and sort of seam them together. And here's sort of a result of that. Another integration we have that's great is the Gaia is another terrain app, and you can actually have it working inside Houdini. So it does very good erosion. It's got certain abilities that maybe the built-in SideFX terrain tools don't have. So you can work with the two in conjunction with each other and get interesting results. It also comes with some sort of presets, so you can like say try this and try that, so it'll build a mountain for you, and then you can see what settings sort of led to that. So it's powerful in that way as well. And having this right inside Houdini means that you can get your whole workflow all in one place instead of jumping back and forth between different applications. So of course, this terrain stuff I just showed you is very much a world building thing, but other world building tools are also available. So one of the great sets we have is our tree tools. So there's a whole sort of suite of tools that you can wire together, and this allows you to build up vegetation. And we're always looking at ways of improving these tools, but right now they've got a set that does some pretty interesting stuff. And here's an example of some stranger stuff built with that exact same tool. And we have some tutorials on that on the website if you want to explore it. This is from Project Titan again, but we have a building tool where you basically model, possibly in another application if you want, the corners, the windows, the doors, and so on, and then this will put them together to build a custom building using your own artwork. So you get to set the style of the building through the models that you have, but instead of building the whole building, you just do a kit of parts, and then this will take over and build the building for you. So that's, and then once you've got it, you've got options for how high you want and how many floors, and then you can use these boxes to push things around. So it's pretty exciting there. And again, that could very well be something you need, so you use it and it's done, or you could just dive in and say, well, how did they do it? And I'll apply some of those concepts and ideas to what I do. So the other area is real-time effects. Again, focused a little bit on games, but again with virtual production and a lot of the film world starting to explore the use of Unreal, these tools will definitely carry over. As a matter of fact, the funny thing was we originally called these the game tools because our focus was enhancing the game side, but so many film customers were using them and taking advantage of them that we at SideFX Labs felt like a more neutral way of talking about them. So obviously flipbook textures is one thing that's traditionally used in a game to get some high quality sort of explosions and so on into your scene. So we have nodes specifically so that after you've created a PyroFX, you can use this to export it into the pieces needed by the real-time engine, whether it be Unreal, I think, and Unity. So here's an example of one of these in here, and you've got enough information that you can actually play around with the lighting inside Unreal, so you don't have to be stuck with the lighting that the volume was rendered initially. You can do tinkering with it here because you're getting all sorts of channels that give you flexibility when you're working with it. And here's an example of it actually working inside. Don't know why the plane's not moving, but anyway, the explosion's doing its thing. And then those were also used. We have a content library on the website where you can download this Village Fire, and it's like a whole example of multiple flipbooks all working within an environment. And so you can certainly take a look at that and see how that works in the real-time experience. So part of the idea here is that Houdini's well known for visual effects. Real-time can't handle some of the stuff we do out of the box, although it's getting better and better every day. But these are tricks that we built that will allow you to get that stuff in. This is just a new SOP that we added that allows you to work with volumes and just in terms of organizing them and visualizing them and so on. The next feature is a pretty powerful one that we've been working a lot with. I think it's a feature that's in Unreal, that's in the game space, but it's really how do you get what you're doing in Houdini into this world. So this is called Vertex Animation Textures. So what happens here is this is a model, and there is a texture map that animates the model. And the way that works is, here's an example of this texture. And essentially, time runs up this side, the point number runs down here, and the RGB value represents the XYZ of that particular point at that particular time. So in Unreal, you can plug this kind of texture map into your model, and you will get like the explosion we just saw. So this becomes quite powerful. And then I think you can drive it through Blueprint. So if you need to trigger it or do whatever, have it start at a certain time, that's all possible. So this allows you to bring some incredibly sophisticated things that you wouldn't think of in a runtime experience, and they now become possible through this technique here because it's very efficient and it's well supported within Unreal. So here's an example of sort of a fluidity example. Again, this is being done with Vertex animation. And what the tools we have in Labs do is they take what you've done in Houdini and they write out that VAT map, which would be very difficult to do otherwise. So, you know, we've got a lot of good control over that. Here's a particle example. Now you can actually send particles from Houdini into Niagara in Unreal. But if you've got a very particular look and feel that you've done in Houdini and you're happy with, then VAT may be a better solution for you because you'll preserve all of that. Here's another example, you know, a kind of weird destruction thing that you probably wouldn't imagine in runtime, and yet VAT makes that possible. This one is actually dealing with level of detail. So built into this VAT texture is the ability to completely replace the model as you get further and further away from it in the timing of that. So all sorts of solutions. I don't have a crowd example. Crowds can also be done with VAT, which is pretty interesting as well. Now, in terms of how deep we've gone into it, I want to show you an example of this is an animation. Looks a little jarring the way that it is there. Let's look at another example. This one, oh wait, so very choppy. But we have options within our tools to say, let's complete the arcs properly. Because of course, these are jumping from frame to frame, and they're just moving to frame, and we don't have the smoothness that you'd expect out of an animation. But we've been working enough with VAT that we're able to put that smoothness back into the picture and get a much better result with VATs than you would get sort of out of the box in other solutions. And here it is in Unreal. So this is the choppier one. And then there it is with the checkbox and getting the smooth one. So VAT is a very powerful thing, and the team actually put a lot of work into getting this section working, and definitely worth exploring if you're moving Houdini stuff into runtime. Sort of another effects thing. We have the Kelvin Wakes deformer. Was added recently. So it allows you to deform geometry to create wakes and just do it on a piece of geometry. There's sort of an example that comes out of that. Now, a lot of these things, you'll notice there's assets we've done which create something like the scaffolding, where it's like an asset, but it's procedural. But these digital assets are also tools, which means they're just tools like any other tool you might use, and they can be used to just solve problems. So we have a whole series of utilities that we provide, things that solve day-to-day problems in what you do. Although this one may not be a day-to-day problem. So we have a simple rope wrap where you can take any piece of geometry and just wrap it up with various ropes and so on. And again, it's interesting as a solution. It might actually be exactly what you need to solve a problem that you have, but it shows you how specific we can get with these. So here's the tool actually in action. So you can bring in these planes and move them around, and then it will get the rope to work. And then it actually has physics built into it. So you press play, and then it droops down, and it looks a little bit more realistic. We have that with other tools like our cable tools. You set them all up, and then you press play, and they droop down. If you're in Unreal, the result gets baked out, but it's interesting that you're using dynamics as part of the modeling of the solution. So you're actually modeling the result using the dynamics. Here's an example of simple shapes. So Houdini itself, we have some primitives and squares and circles, but this gives you access to a whole bunch of base shapes that you can use to start off what you're doing. So that's an interesting one that I can see a lot of people taking advantage of. It could also be used as control curves for rigging and, maybe other things like that. So this is the connectivity and segmentation SOP. I may need to read this one. It divides meshes into seamless segments for multi-threaded processing, and it speeds up operation, and it's used in the lab's fast remesh SOP to achieve a faster result. So sometimes these are even low-level tools, but you may find a use for them, but we're already using them. That's the other thing is we can have assets can actually be nested inside other assets. So this is an example of this is a node that sits inside other nodes that might sit inside other nodes, and that nesting allows a nice branching of ideas as they go. Now this next one is called merge spline. So if you have a whole bunch of curves and you just wish that they all had points at the corners and all connected, this tool will actually do that for you. So it's good for doing like road systems or other things like that. What's interesting is that this was a community contribution. So this was not done specifically in Labs itself. It was done by an artist in the community who then contributed it to Labs. So that's pretty exciting there. And definitely, if anyone wants to participate, well, we'll talk about that in a little bit. The other thing, Polywire UV, again, another community contribution, but designed to create seamless tiling, especially in difficult situations like this branching. You get a much better result using this tool. There's actually a whole suite of UV ones. There's obviously a lot of problems with UVs that need to be solved, so we got a bunch of tools for that kind of thing. So next is to talk about the tools as sort of a pipeline or automation. So digital assets are good for that, but within Labs there are actually tools that can contribute to a larger pipeline solution. And one of the biggest examples of that is sort of taking high-res meshes and reducing them down so they can be supported better within a real-time environment. So here's an example of a scan model, and then that's brought in. In this case, we use Alice Vision to do the initial quad remesh, and then you see a whole bunch of nodes in there for straighten, match size, clean up the base, delete small parts, because sometimes there's a bunch of little garbage parts that you just don't really need, so you can get rid of all those. You tighten it up. Maybe you convert it into a VDB so that everything's coherent. Then you mesh that. Then you poly reduce the mesh. Then you set up UVs. And so that can be built up into a little pipeline like this. Now what's neat is that this pipeline could then go into PDG, and you could say, go into that folder with 25 models and just run through them. And it'll go off and chug away, and then you'll get a bunch of models all set up and ready to go. So this can be a pipeline for an individual artist, or it can be part of a larger automation solution. And I think this one, let me just, I think this was, yeah, this is a movie. We can actually walk through and see all the different stages. So here it is starting off with the initial photogrammetry, and what's neat is it's a separate application, but it's running right here in Houdini, so you don't have to go somewhere else to do it. It's going in, cleaning up the points, cleaning up the base, closing up the base. If you wanted to convert this to a volume, you're going to have to tighten it up. Oh, and I think it also does this workflow also does baking, so you can bake the small details back into the model, so you can have a lower res model with high detail through the normal map. So all of that are the kinds of things that this does. Triangulate, set up normals, and then this one specifically gets scaled out to go to Unreal because we knew that's where we were headed, and so on and so forth. So it's all set and ready to go. So these tools, like we said, they become a part of your wider tool set, and they're often designed specifically to solve real-world problems like this. So how can you get involved in SideFX Labs with the work that you do? Obviously, we make these things to help you, but there's ways that you can contribute back as well. I talked earlier about the public roadmap. So this is the SideFX Labs page. There's a roadmap button, and then that takes you to here. And you can click on any one of these, and it asks you how important this is to you, and you can provide feedback. So that can be helpful just right there, which is, the more feedback we get that such and such a tool is really wanted in the community, then we know to maybe put the emphasis on that over other things. So that's a way to contribute as well. The other area is we run every year a Tech Art Challenge. You may have heard of Houdini, where we have an image contest. This is the opposite of that. This is where you actually create tools. And we've had some really interesting tools built in this contest, things like pipe generators, things to cover snow. So we have two categories. One is the best game art. So the Sea Shacks, Skate Bowl. So these are some of the winners in the last one. And we also have just a best utility. So we have, here are some examples. Somebody did a new Megascan browser, something for wedging, and so on. So what's interesting about this is that we've made some very interesting connections through this process. Not only are these tools that you can go and download and play with, and maybe sometimes these people go off and keep developing it on their own. But we've also brought some of that in-house. So for instance, one of the winners from 2 years ago, Christos, we hired him, and now he's building tools directly for the labs team. So it was a great way of him showcasing his skills, and then us recognizing that would be a valuable addition to the team. And then Erwin, not only did he do that other tool with the curves, he also did one called Polysplice, which is now made it as an official SideFX Labs tool. So this contest ends up being a great vehicle for if you want to test your skills making tools, you can do it and then you can win prizes and stuff like that. So that's fun. So the Tech Art Challenge for this year, we plan to run it in November. So start coming up with ideas and getting ready, and then you can add into it and be part of that workflow as well. And if you're working in studios as well, I mean, use labs tools, talk to the labs team, make suggestions. I think on the roadmap you can make suggestions of tools you'd like to see. So if you would like to see our interpretation of a tool that you're trying to make, the labs team could maybe help with that as well. So yeah, so that's sort of where labs fits into the mix of everything, is these higher level tools designed to support the production team that you have and extend your team and make it more robust. So thank you very much. I hope this has been helpful to you. And yeah, you're able to use labs.
Terrific, Rob. Thanks. Any questions? Yeah.
Sorry, I have many questions, but I'll just try to keep to two. The first question I have is being in the pipeline. I didn't see any database connection, but do you support MySQL? Like if I wanted to make a tool in Houdini to track assets or to send information to through MySQL or some Oracle or some other.
Well, in PDG, we have some connections to Deadline. So I think there are situations where we're connecting to farms and things outside of ourselves. So I think that would definitely be possible.
Okay.
We don't, that's one area we haven't set them up ourselves. But definitely that could be something that you might be interested in taking further. I mean, one of the things I talk about, artist-built tools. You can build these tools with nodes, but we also have nodes where you can add code. So you can add Python, you can add, you know,
so I could do a
Vex,
a
you can do all
Python
sorts of
object.
yeah. So there's that. I just try to not talk about that so that artists can feel, yay, we can make tools too.
And then the other question is, have you had anybody that has built a tool in Houdini and then have that tool be batchable? So like you're not actually running a UI Houdini, but you're running a command line with the tool.
That's possible with any of them.
Process.
Well, that thing I talked about, PDG is one area specifically where you can just bring a digital asset in as part of this flow. And one of the things that's neat about PDG is, whereas in Houdini, when you have a network, you're stuck on your computer with whatever your computer's capable of. PDG, you can actually extend it beyond to a farm or the cloud. So, you know, if you have to run, you know, thousands of tasks through it, you can distribute that around a farm and get the results much faster. So there's some interesting possibilities, especially if you focus on what PDG can do.
Thank you.
No, it's better to keep it in the
Yeah, because then we record it over there.
Hi. Overlapping with that, a question about automated testing of an HDA. If you wanted to put it out, what would be the best practice? Would it be something through PDG? Would it be tying Houdini engine into some sort of command line test harness?
I mean, I know we do that for all of our sort of regression testing. We will set up HIP files or digital assets, put them in scene files, and then every morning that gets run and tested to see if the result looks exactly the same as it did the day before. So we do that, yes. And so that would be easy for you as well.
Other questions? Yeah.
Thank you. Since we switched to Python 3, I think some of the nodes are made include a lot of Python 2, and thus there is a roadmap to be sure that all the nodes are compatible with Python 3.
I can't answer that specifically, but maybe if we can pull an R&D person a little bit later in there, that would be better, because they know what exactly they're doing when they're moving to the next version.
Okay.
It could be that they target certain ones more than others, but I can't say exactly which will or won't. The other thing, the other thing I was going to bring up, there's this node type within Houdini, which is interesting, called compile blocks. And has anyone used compile blocks? Okay, so what these are is you put a beginning and an end, and you put your nodes inside there. And then when you run your system, it's going to actually compile everything into code and run much, much smoother. So as your networks and things you do in Houdini or your tools you're building get more and more sophisticated, these compile blocks can actually shave time off as things there. Now, the one thing about compile blocks is not every node is supported in it. That's sort of where what you were saying clicked that in my head, which was, some of them haven't been updated. We're constantly working through to update all of our nodes to be compilable, but not all of them are. And I think if you look at the node, there's a little icon that says whether it will or will not be compilable. So if you can put a bunch of compilable nodes and then get them into one of these blocks, then you're going to get a much more efficient result than if you just do it sort of out of the box.
Thank you. Just kind of a silly question. When do you decide when it's time to move a labs tool into the full package? Well,
I think it depends on whether it's it's often that there's a need that's been identified and it's just coming up again and again and again. And R&D, in order to bring it over, we're not going to just bring it over as is. R&D is probably going to look for a way, can we code this? Can we make it more efficient? So they need to have the runway to do that and give that tool its proper time. So it's really just a matter of when is a resource available? Has that tool proven to be popular enough that it should be part of the main code base? Do we want to make it compilable and all that kind of thing?
Cool. Thank you.
Yeah, as an addition to that, it's basically two roadmaps, two totally different roadmaps, and R&D decides on Houdini.
Hi, I had a question.
Sure.
Is there any specific SideFX Labs tools for within the LOPS context? And if not, is there a plan to bring Labs tools into Solaris?
I actually can't think of any. I don't think it's been getting the love that it probably needs. So it would be, like, if you want to do the challenge, a LOPS node would be well received.
Thank you.
Yeah. I think our tendency is to think of it as game stuff, and we still haven't quite made the full transition mindset-wise that there's all these other parts of Houdini that really could use the same attention.
Are there any tools right now that are in development that haven't been released yet that you're particularly excited about?
Yes, we'll learn more about that in the next few months. There's things they're not ready to talk about, but there's some pretty cool things in the pipeline.
Keep an eye on the product board for the upcoming stuff. Yeah.
Some of these ones might not even be on the product board. Some of them they're just in the background doing some cool stuff, and we'll eventually see it.
I'm just curious, for artists who want to build tools, are there any good resources to know what best practices are? What I've noticed is sometimes when some of our artists build tools, it becomes very tuned to them. And the minute we want to start using them for the entire team, it doesn't work out, or we have to rewrite it. Where could artists go to get that kind of information as they're building tools?
I think when we first started Labs, we had a bit of a template or style guide or suggestion, but I'm not sure it helped that much, so we haven't really used it as much. I think that comes down to the tool designer deciding, how can I make this a general tool? And maybe the best way is to have maybe somebody designs it for their needs, and then somebody else that has a bigger worldview can say, how can I convert that into something? And this again is the power of the digital asset stuff, is I do my tool, but somebody else can rip it apart and put it together a different way and say, well, here, this is a more generic version of that tool that will help everybody on the team, not just that one person. But yeah, that's a good idea. I mean, I'll talk to the Labs team about maybe they can do something there. I mean, yeah. Maybe there's something on the GitHub. Have you gone to the GitHub for Labs?
No, I've not gone there.
You might want to check that out. They might actually have some suggestions for themselves that they put out there for people. But
okay,
thank you.
Other questions? Yeah, of course it's in the front row.
Yeah. Run, Chris, run.
Thanks. I was thinking about I don't know if you know the Substance player, but you can run a Substance file without the software. Do you think it could be great to have something like that? Like you can run a HDA for someone that don't want to install Houdini, but you can have like a black box with just the parameter, and you can just generate geometry and just export like a file or something like that.
Sorry,
it's a bit crazy.
Inside Substance?
No. So it's just a comparison to Substance player. Have something similar.
Oh, you mean so the assets can be run without a
the
license.
installation of it's like a light version.
Yeah, I don't think that's possible.
No, it's not. No, I know it's not possible, but it's something you talk about.
No, I mean, like I think at some point it might be nice for us to create a smaller library that would then be available for that kind of thing. But then it'd be jumping through hoops trying to figure out what can I do, what am I allowed to do, what am I not allowed to do, what's possible, and so on. The reality is, because the assets can do anything in Houdini, like when I take it to Unreal, you can do anything in Houdini, but in the end you've got to talk to to Unreal.
Yeah, it's like a Houdini engine, but
Yeah.
running by itself
Yeah.
on Windows.
I don't know if this idea comes up all the time.
I know.
The light Houdini. It comes up all the time. We talk about it every week, and it's a great idea, and we're going to keep talking about it until the right thing comes through. So,
I kind of have a suggestion, not about running independently, but I do have this big problem in another application. I'm interested in not necessarily running it or processing, but actually just getting the information out, so that I can track it or do all sorts of management stuff with it. And I found parsing, I'm ending up that it's faster to just parse ASCII data than it is to open the application and parse ASCII data and get the information inside of that ASCII data than it is to open up the application, load the asset, and load on the information. I'm always interested in, like, if there was like a tool that would let me look at all the information into a file and just get that information so I could track that information to database or management versioning.
Well, I think, yeah, I mean, when you use your asset and you spit out the results, then you could probably spit out a format that would be readable in that way, for
Right.
sure.
No, but I was just curious if there was a tool to get if there was a fast way to get information on the HDAs or something like that without running the entire process, just parsing just the information out of the file.
I'm not sure, sorry.
Yeah, that's it.
Somebody here might know, but
and Rob will be next door at the lounge all day. So if you want to, he can sort of point to the right people that can answer those questions, because we've got all kinds of
there's someone
staffers.
here.
Final question. Here we go.
How do you feel about the latest generative AI and deep learning will affect this and the industry?
Sorry, the latest?
Generative AI.
Oh, it always has to come back to AI, doesn't it? Well, I think SideFX is looking at different ways that AI can be part of the picture. We don't want to see it as a one button, go and make visual effects tool, but we know that there are areas within Houdini where AI will make things faster, better, more accurate, and so on. And so we are starting to build ideas into it that will allow that to happen. We'll maybe see a little bit of it coming soon, but it's probably a little bit longer picture. But definitely we have our eye on it, and we have people tinkering with things. That is probably beyond labs. I think that needs to happen with R&D first. And then once some of the foundational pieces are in place, then labs can go and have fun with that and make all sorts of stuff on top of it. Now, obviously, we have the MLOps, which is sort of an outside project. So there are people doing that stuff already. But that tends, I think what we want to do is find ones that actually will affect the 3D aspects of Houdini, the visual effects, the characters, all the stuff that's happening within Houdini. We're going to make sure that we're tying into that. But not a one-button solution. It'll be little parts that guide you where you can just a little, I think a perfect example for me is like Adobe's content-aware fill. You don't even know you're using AI, but you are, and it solves a big problem. So it's pretty cool. So we want to be more on that vein for sure.
Yeah, if you haven't seen the MLOps presentation that was done yesterday by Paul Ambrosius and Moritz Schwind, it'll be on SideFX.com, so that they'll take you through that project. But in terms of the internal stuff, it's exactly what Rob said. It'll be ethical AI. It'll be using properly trained data, and it'll be baked into the DNA of Houdini in ways that help the artist. Thanks, Rob. Excellent presentation. Thank you.